Even as Week 7 of the General Assembly's short session has passed, Week 8 prepares to bring with it another round of deadlines over numerous bills still in limbo at the Indiana State House. The House has until Tuesday, the Senate until Thursday to vote bills out of committees. Full chamber votes follow in the House and Senate on March 4 and 5, respectively. Now, the Indiana Capitol Chronicle reports that among the measures awaiting further action, those include dealing with property taxes, 13th checks, foreign ownership of agricultural land, limits to the governor's executive powers, and a bill to condemn anti-Semitism in educational settings across the state. Well, we'll talk with our guests from the House and the Senate about prospective measures in motion at the State House on this week's Primetime. And good evening, I'm Bruce Haines. And with us today is 13th District Republican State Senator and Assistant President Pro Tem Sue Glick. And also with us is 79th District Republican State Representative and House Majority Floor Leader Matt Lehman. And as always, we invite you to join the conversation with your questions and comments. Just call the number that you see on the screen. And as we widen out and welcome Sue and welcome Matt to the program, thank you for being here.
Thanks,
Bruce. It's good to be here, Bruce.
And it is important to note we have representatives, we have a representative, we have a senator, and we have leaders in these chambers. So take advantage as we are here on this Friday to talk with you. And this is a short session. You've seen many of them in various sizes, long, short, special. How's this one so far?
So far, it's been a hurry up and wait, but it's been rather frantic the last week or so as people are moving their bills as quickly as they can. They've told us to do that all along, and I think the urgency set in about a week ago, and people realize if your bill's not moving, maybe you need to amend the important parts into other legislation that is getting some attention if you want it to pass. We're reaching the deadlines when bills have to be amended and have to be, if they have to be recommitted to appropriation or Ways and Means for review because there's a financial factor involved, it has to be done this week, and so they have to move them.
Mr. Lehman?
Yeah, and as short sessions go, I've been through several, and this is I say it's kind of the one that's moved the fastest in a way, but yet at the same time, I think we've kept a lot of people on track. Like we told them going into the session, here's the deal, it's gonna be a short session, it's gonna be a quick, short session, and get your bill where you can concur with your Senate partner because you're gonna end up with about 3 or 4 days to go to conference. And some people get this, they get used to this game of, well, I'll get it where I want it, and then the Senate will get it where they want it, and then we'll go back and forth. I'll give here, you take there. The time's gonna run out. So we're telling people, get your bill right now, and so that you don't have to go to conference, and you can get it, work it out with your Senate colleagues. And so that's been taken to heart.
Oh, I think
and
so.
So you have a lot of people, as Sue said, that are rushing around right now and getting their bill in a good place in the Senate, so when it comes back to us, we can concur and move on.
It does seem we're at that point where there is as much interest in what bills are moving as what bills aren't moving. And it leads me to this general question, is there one or so bills that are surprising to you about their movement or lack thereof at this hour?
Well, I don't know that I would say their lack thereof, because the thing is this, and again, it kind of goes back to we're down to the last 2 days on the House side of hearings, but there's several bills that we've been holding to do just what I said earlier, is try to get those maybe in the right place and reach a point where we can. So I think one of them I saw on your first run through these different bills was the governor's powers. Well, Senate Bill 234, of which I'm the House sponsor, and it will be moving, but it's going to be, we still got to try to get this in the right place. I tell people we don't want to relitigate COVID. What we want to do, though, is to make sure that we're establishing that fair balance of powers between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And so what came over from the Senate was a bill that said, here's what the governor can and cannot do and the length of time they can. And while I agree with some of that, there's some of it that needs to be tweaked. And so we're working on that. So I think you're going to see that probably be in a committee early in the week here, and we'll get that out, and then we'll go from there.
Mm-hmm. And so any one in particular that's of interest to you as to where it is or versus where it should be?
No, I think some of these are moving. There's a few that are going to die. We can anticipate that, and portions of them may reappear before the end of the session, but some just aren't ripe yet, if you will. And there's been several. I think Representative Schmaltz had a bill to raise the speed limit on the interstates to 75 for trucks, and well, for everyone actually. And he said, when he introduced it, I want to see what the feeling is, what the sentiment is, kind of test the waters. And I don't believe that he anticipated that it was going to pass this session, but he wanted to start the conversation and get some feedback on where people and where the agencies thought that might land.
Mm-hmm. And I do think we're hearing a lot of people who have said, I'm really setting the stage for 25. For one of two reasons. Either one is I don't think the bill's right where it should be, but I want to get input. Okay. And the best way to get input is put the bill out there, because you'll hear pretty quickly.
That's right.
From the people that don't like that bill, or they love that bill. But the second piece is that there are things that have maybe a fiscal attachment potentially, and you want to kind of see where that might be, knowing you're not going to do anything this session with a spending bill, but it does set the table now going into the budget session for next year.
Here's may well be a perfect example among many, but it's the one that deals with two different approaches to pension bonuses for public retirees. You have in the House side 1004 about a priority bill for that 13th check, and I know you're connected to that, Matt. And the Senate has 275 if you're scoring at home, but that's a longer term plan of being able to extend funding, and not just necessarily one time. But still, House Speaker Todd Houston told reporters his caucus won't green light changes to benefit bonuses without delivering an immediate return to retirees. How do you unscramble this egg with the time you have left?
Well,
do you want to take that first?
Well, I'll take it first, and you can Matt, clean up. One of the problems, and people don't necessarily understand this, the state might have funding to fund their portion of the 13th check or a cost of living adjustment, but there's also a component for locals, the municipalities, the towns, the cities, and others, and their law enforcement groups and so on. So anytime we take an action like that, it has repercussions to the locals. And we normally budget on a 2-year cycle. So if we just automatically grant a 13th check or cost of living without consulting some of our partners in cities and towns and those areas, they may not have it built into their budget. They may not be able to cover it. And that's unfair to them for us to make arbitrary decisions. It's much better, at least we in the Senate feel, that it's much better to come to a long-term decision, maybe because of the amounts of salaries that teachers and other employees were receiving, and back in the day when everyone's life expectancy was about 68 or 70, and now they're living to 90. Maybe we need to work about supplemental reserve funds to augment their retirement, because money doesn't go as far as it used to. And then from another date forward, we do cost of living, because the salaries did pick up over time. And that's why the Senate approached it the way they did, is anticipation of a long-term solution. I think the House was looking at it, an immediate 13th check, and then maybe adopting part of our long-term solution. I'm hoping that's what they're doing.
Well, and I'll say, this is the place that maybe the Senate and the House don't see eye to eye. Okay, and I think what the House has said for the past, I think we've passed this now over you guys for
every year.
6 years in a row now. And I think what it is we've looked at it. I think Sue's right. There needs to be a longer term approach. But the 13th check has been there. It's been there before. It's been, and I'm not saying you do things because it's always been the process. But over the last decade plus, there's been that 13th check. Yeah. And what it was is there was no cost of living increase. So the 13th check was our way of saying, hey, here's kind of that immediate cost of living increase. With the last couple of years especially is many have come to say that that's a necessity for me, not a 1% COLA that might put $4 or $5 in my pocket, but truly that 13th check. So I do think there probably needs to be both a cost of living approach to this, so you do have a long-term solution, and eventually you phase out that 13th check. But as it stands right now, it's funded. It's not an additional appropriation. It's not something we have to go and take money out of some other fund. It's there. So it can be done, and that's why I think the speaker has kind of maybe put more of that, spear in the ground of this is it needs to happen. Because we've done in the past and we've always gotten, haven't got our colleagues on the other side to agree. And so I think this year, that's why we made it one of our priorities.
And this will be one of those fun to watch and one of the ones to watch as we move into the final weeks of the session. We have an offline call from Michael we'd like to get to, which is phrased as follows. Do you think that the governor will veto the bill to limit his power?
Well, I don't think so. And I can't speak on behalf of the administration, but one of the things we've tried to do, excuse me, if you remember, so 1123 that we passed in 2021, that was my bill that said, we need to have some parameters around a state of emergency in the state of Indiana where we sit on the sidelines. And the timing of COVID in 2020 could not have been worse. It hit Indiana literally the week we got out in March. So you had the situation where March and April, and as you got into May and June, as things started to tighten up, again, we, the General Assembly, the legislative branch, sat on the sidelines. That is the past. What we said now is, if this happens again, at what point? So the governor vetoed 1123. We overrode the veto, and then the Supreme Court shot us down, and basically said it's clear the Constitution only allows the governor to call back the General Assembly, and you can't call yourselves back. But what we do have the authority to do is limit the time. For example, if you call it a state of emergency, you have so many days to do this and this and this. So what 234 does is it says you have basically 30 days and an extension of 30, and I'd like to look at this as kind of a hard 60 days, statewide. I'd like to see it statewide. And I think if that's the case, I think the governor will sign that.
I agree. I'm in hopes that will happen. He's looking at it from a little different perspective now, because 2 years ago during COVID or whatever, he was in the first 2 years of his second term. Now he's looking at his career in the rearview mirror, if you will, and he's looking more in terms of what does this mean in terms of emergencies, because quite often emergencies carry with them a cost, and where do we get the funds, and how do we address these issues? It's one thing if it's a national emergency and the federal government steps up with a large check. It's another if it's more regionalized, or it's more, maybe a tornado hits Henryville or some small area of the state, and it can be addressed much differently than in a statewide emergency like COVID was. So those things can be addressed in different time frames and time periods, but 30 days or 60 days may not be enough. Right. But then again, we don't want them to languish forever without some input from the General Assembly.
Well, I think also is that you have, the timing is right, because if you're going to put any parameters around the powers of a governor, do it before the new governor comes in.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are at that position where Governor Holcomb's term limited, so we will have a new governor come January of next year, whoever that may be. We want to set the table to say this is where again, you still have the power to call us in, but these are the triggers that would force that based on those timeframes. And if I'm the governor, I'd want to know coming in, where are my parameters? I want to know that of every department in the state, right? What powers do I have? And this is a place we say, you, the incoming governor, have this much authority before you have to bring us in.
And Michael, thank you very much for your call. Let's go to Tom, who is sharing another question offline, and it goes like this. Why are property and insurance values rising and taxpayers are having to pay higher taxes?
assessed valuation. The values, and we're caught in a period of time when the values are rising so rapidly and part of that is the fact we have a housing shortage. We simply, have more people. We have jobs, some of which are open because we don't have people to fill them. But single-family residential is an extremely competitive market right now, and that drives the value on houses. People are willing to pay a little more to get the house they want or get into their first home or what have you. What that does is that drives the price. The market value goes up, and with trending, you have a situation where then the values across the board go up and the taxes rise. What is also happening right now is there is a task force working. It's a 2-year, I believe, project, and it's chaired by Senator Travis Holdman from Markle, and they are looking at all the taxes in Indiana, income taxes, property taxes, sales taxes, and all the other taxes and fees that enter into the budget of Indiana. And what we're trying to do is figure out the sweet spot. How do we get these things in line so any one area is not paying more than their share, or any type of real estate or paying more than their share?
Yeah, and I'll just briefly touch on the second part of that, which was the insurance, because that's the industry I'm in. And what we're seeing is inflation. It's inflation, because what we're seeing is the cost of repairs are increasing. When insurance companies have to pay the cost of repairs, those costs get passed on to the consumer. And we've seen large increases across the board on all carriers. So you have prices going up on construction, which means we don't build as many houses, which means we have a housing shortage, which takes us back to taxes are going up on those houses that are selling at a somewhat of an inflated rate. Yeah. So it's all kind of cyclical to your house is now more valuable to both replace physically and on the marketplace.
There you go. Tom, thank you very much for checking in. Jeff has a question and called it in and asks, do you have an opinion on the governor dedicating wetlands, the Buchanan unit, but signing legislation to downsize wetlands? And I was going to start with Sue, just wetlands in general. It was the first bill signed out of the short session, we know that, and it didn't seem to come up in conversation much, not that it was secretive at all, but going into the first part of the session, all of a sudden,
there
it is. Or so it felt.
Well, 1383 was basically an agency bill by the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. They are attempting, there have been a number of court rulings in the past few years, and most of those have been unfavorable to the preservation of wetlands, frankly. They basically have reined in the waters of the United States, which said that every wet spot in a field or an area was basically under the control of the Environmental Protection Agency, and it was waters of the United States, and it couldn't be disturbed without various permits and all of that. Then we had the United States Supreme Court weighing in and saying, no, that's not so. We're going to limit those powers, and there's various decisions. What the Indiana Department of Environmental Management says, we have too many rules. We have a set of federal rules, we have a set of state rules, and everyone who wants to do work on their own property, which they bought and paid for, now has to get a set of state permits, and then they have to start over through the federal government and get their federal permits. This is an attempt to get these in somewhat a comparable order so that they mirror each other and we can eliminate duplication of this permitting process. I wasn't involved in the bill. I wasn't asked to be by anyone involved in the bill. And it went through the House first. It's a 4-digit number, so those are House bills. Went through the House, came over to the Senate, went through Environmental Management. I voted against the bill. I'm not entirely opposed to the concept, but it was the speed, the rapidity that it went through, and the lack of input from some of the environmental groups. I really think they should have had a seat at the table. I think other people should have been involved. I can't complain that the permitting process should be streamlined, and we should know Whether or not I need a permit, they call them general permit. You're allowed to do things like pull logs out of ditches or, those kinds of things under this bill. The reason it went through so fast has been explained to me that in order for the Department of Environmental Management to start implementing this July 1, they were going to have to pass regulations. They need 30 days to post those regulations, take public comment, and then pass them so that they can have their forms and everything online so that people know that it's implemented and here's what they have to do. So that was the explanation given to me. As I said, I voted against the bill. I'm not entirely opposed to some of the concepts. I just wish we'd had more time and more people involved in the actual vetting of the bill.
Right. Yeah, I voted for the bill,
Yeah.
partly because we've spent the last several years dealing with this. And I think, as Sue mentioned at the beginning, we went from, basically anything that had standing water was considered a wetland. And we went then to, I don't like pendulum swings, right? So I don't want to go to where, I had one guy tell me, if you can drain it, it's not a wetland. Well, that's too far the other way. So over the last couple of years, I know we've had bills that have been a little bit controversial. All this does is say, as Sue said, we've already got these in place. We've got these Class 1, Class 2, Class 3. How do we now streamline that process of permitting so that if I meet the qualifications that this is what's Class 1, how do I get it through the process a lot quicker? And I think so I don't think this was nearly as controversial as we've had in the past. I think it was just more of we got to get this out, as Sue said, because there is a process, and that process was not going to get done by July 1st when we have to implement the law, unless we did it that very early on.
Right.
And keep in mind, for a lot of farmers especially, this is the time of year they want to get those drainage projects done because they're going to be planting, those fields are going to be full. They don't have time to start over in June, July, or August. They're going to have crops in the field.
Yeah.
They need to have some certainty on what they need to do and what they have to have in place before they start.
Right. With the time we have left, not only in the session but in the show, which is not much, let me give you each at least a minute to share what legislation you're still carrying that is alive and well and moving along. And Matt, let me start with you on that one.
Well, I have several pieces that are still alive. Well is in the eye of the beholder because they're alive, may not be well. But there's things that like I said, we all kind of bring our expertise. So mine have been around some insurance issues, and so we have some problems with people, especially foreign governments, injecting themselves into a lot of our litigation and into a lot of our financing of litigation. And so I've been involved in that, and that's moving. On the kind of the positive, the things you feel good about is I had the privilege of sitting on the semi-quincentennial committee, which is celebrating America's 250th birthday, and we have an honorary license plate bill that has gone through the process and is now through the Senate and back to me. And I think it's just neat to be able to do some things that affect everybody, they're for everybody, but don't have a cost or a negative impact and things like that. There's not controversy around them. So it's always nice to have something like that. So that's the positive. The other things I've got going on are moving, but some of them went through right away, but other ones are just kind of hanging on yet.
Gotcha. And Sue?
Well, I had a small wetlands bill from the standpoint of to give incentive to builders and developers and maybe others who own property that have wetlands. Mature wetlands do a far better job of giving us clean water and fulfilling the promise of wetlands. And so this bill would allow the Department of Natural Resources, upon request, together with the Soil and Water Conservation Service, of certifying land as wetlands, and then they would qualify. There's the term in DNR language is wildlands, but basically it's very similar to your forest reserve, where you can reduce the taxation on those properties, and therefore there's an incentive, a financial incentive, to leave that land in wetlands. And for developers, that's a piece of property they couldn't build on unless they bulldozed it out. It's far cheaper to leave it there, take the tax incentive, maybe pass it on to the ultimate property owner with a little extra land on their lot. But it benefits everybody along the way, and it gives us the clean water that we really want from the mature wetlands. I have another little bill that's just a veterans bill. It's for catastrophically disabled veterans. We have individuals who've served our country, been injured in the process, severely so. This allows for a special hunting season. It will take place in September when the weather's just a little bit better for them, and allow them to go out in the woods, most of them with guides that would assist them but can't hunt. So these individuals who've given so much to this nation can have the opportunity to hunt and take part in nature, which they don't have at this point. So
we got a long way to go and a short time to get there, says the song, and with a lot of good things along the way for discussion. And I thank you both for the discussion tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
State Senator Sue Glick, State Representative Matt Lehman. I'm Bruce Haines. And for everyone with Primetime, thank you for watching, and take care. We'll see you next week. Good night. The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by
Businesses constantly evolve. The Rogers Company started as Rogers Markets in 1944. Today, the Rogers Company is commercial property and real estate development and a proud supporter of PBS Fort Wayne. The Regional Chamber of Northeast Indiana advocates for world-class infrastructure, a competitive business climate, 21st century talent, and rural investment. One region, one voice. NEINadvocates.com.